At its peak, the Persian Empire controlled 44% of the entire world's population. No empire before or since has ever matched that number. Not Rome, not the Mongols, not the British. So why does almost nobody talk about it? Here's what you were never taught in school. While Greece was a collection of squabbling city-states and Rome was barely a village on a hill, Persia had already built roads, banks, legal codes, and a postal system that stretched across 3 continents. The year is 550 BC. The ancient world is dominated by brutal empires. The Assyrians who impaled enemies on spikes, the Babylonians who enslaved entire nations, the Medes who ruled through fear. And then a man named Cyrus walks out of the mountains of southern Iran. 2 questions before we go further. First, why did every major civilization that followed Persia copy its administrative system? And second, if Persia was this powerful, what actually destroyed it? Stay with us. Both answers will surprise you. This is episode 1 of our Persian history series. By the end, you'll understand not just what Persia was, but why the world you live in today carries its fingerprints. History in progress. Let's begin. Cyrus II, known to history as Cyrus the Great, was not the kind of conqueror the ancient world was used to. He didn't enslave the people he defeated. He didn't burn their temples. He didn't force his religion on them. He did something far more radical. He let them keep everything. In 539 BC, Cyrus conquered Babylon, one of the most powerful cities on earth. And then he did something no ruler had ever done before. He freed all enslaved peoples inside Babylon, including thousands of Jewish captives. He issued a decree, inscribed on a clay cylinder, that every person had the right to their own religion, their own home, their own life. That clay cylinder, the Cyrus cylinder, now sits in the British Museum. The United Nations recognized it as one of the earliest declarations of human rights in history. A Persian king too, 500 years ago, writing the concept of human dignity into law. But here is the strategic genius behind the compassion. By allowing conquered peoples to keep their culture, Cyrus turned potential rebels into loyal subjects. His empire didn't need massive garrisons and constant war to hold together. It held itself together because people actually preferred Persian rule. This was the Achaemenid blueprint. Rule through legitimacy, not just force, and it worked for 220 years. If you are watching this and thinking that sounds like the foundation of modern statecraft, you are right. And we're just getting started. Stay locked in. Cyrus built the empire. Darius I, who came to power in 522 BC, turned it into a machine. Darius was not a warrior king in the romantic sense. He was something the ancient world had never seen before. A systems thinker. A manager of civilizations. He divided the empire into 20 administrative regions called satrapies, each governed by a local leader, each paying taxes to Persepolis, each maintaining its own laws and culture within the Persian framework. This was federalism. In 500 BC, 2,000 years before America invented it. Darius also built the Royal Road too, 700 kilometers connecting Susa to Sardis, cutting across mountains and deserts. Relay stations every 25 kilometers meant a royal message could travel the entire length in 7 days, the ancient world's version of the internet. And it was Persian. He standardized currency. He created a professional civil service. He commissioned Persepolis, a city so architecturally advanced that archaeologists today still cannot fully explain how it was built. Delegations from 28 nations are carved into its stairways, each bringing tribute, each rendered with dignity, not humiliation. Pattern interrupt. Think about this. The Romans get credit for roads. The British get credit for colonial administration. But Persia did both, 1,000 years earlier, and treated the conquered with more dignity than either. The historical record is clear. The narrative just hasn't caught up yet. Keep watching. Now, the Persian Wars. You've heard this story. 300 Spartans. Thermopylae. The brave Greeks defeating the Persian tyrants. It is one of the most powerful narratives in Western history. Here is the problem. Almost none of it reflects the actual power dynamics involved. When Xerxes I invaded Greece in 480 BC, he was not some irrational monster. He was responding to Greek city-states that had funded a rebellion inside his empire. From the Persian perspective, this was a policing action against insurgents. The Greeks were the ones who struck first, at Sardis in 498 BC. Yes, the Persians lost at Salamis. Yes, they eventually withdrew from Greece. But here is what that narrative leaves out. Persia continued to dominate the Mediterranean for another 150 years after those battles. The Greeks were exhausted. Persia was barely inconvenienced. In fact, after the Persian Wars, it was Persian gold, literally Persian money, that funded Athens' golden age. The Persians played Greek city-states against against each other for generations. Athens versus Sparta, Corinth versus Thebes, all manipulated from Persepolis. The Persians didn't lose the war, they changed the battlefield. Here is your cliffhanger. If Persia was this strategically dominant, why did it fall to a 25-year-old Macedonian general in less than a decade? The answer reveals a fatal flaw at the heart of the Achaemenid system, and it is a lesson that every modern superpower should study. Coming up next, in 334 BC, Alexander of Macedon crossed into Persian territory with 40,000 soldiers. The Persian Empire had an army of hundreds of thousands. By every metric, this should not have been a contest. And yet, within 9 years, the greatest empire the ancient world had ever seen was gone. Here is why. The Achaemenid system, built on tolerance and decentralization, had a fatal flaw. Local satraps had too much independence. The Persian court had grown too comfortable. The kings who came after Darius lacked his administrative genius. By the time Darius III faced Alexander, the Persian command structure was fragmented, slow, and deeply political. At the Battle of Gaugamela in 331 BC, Alexander didn't win because his army was larger. It wasn't. He won because he was faster, more decisive, and because Darius III fled the battlefield. That single moment shattered Persian morale across the empire. Not because the empire was weak, but because the king's nerve broke. When Alexander reached Persepolis, he burned it, supposedly in revenge for the Persian burning of Athens 150 years earlier. But historical accounts suggest he regretted it almost immediately. Even Alexander understood what he had destroyed. He began dressing in Persian clothes, adopting Persian customs, and marrying Persian royalty. The deepest irony of Persian history. The man who destroyed the Achaemenid Empire spent the rest of his life trying to become a Persian king. That is the measure of what Persia was. Even in defeat, its civilization was so superior that its conqueror was absorbed by it. Remember that. We'll return to it in episode 2. The word paradise is Persian, paradisa, meaning a walled garden. The concept of a perfect, ordered, beautiful space enclosed from chaos. That word traveled through Greek into Latin into English, and it carried with it the entire Persian worldview. Order, beauty, dignity, within boundaries. Chess came from Persia. Polo came from Persia. The concept of human rights law came from Persia. The postal system, provincial governance, standardized weights and measures, religious tolerance as state policy, all Persian before they were anything else. Civilization didn't emerge from one place, but it was organized for the first time in Persia. And the influence didn't end with Alexander. The Parthians rebuilt Persian power. The Sasanians brought it to its second golden peak. Persian scholars in the Islamic Golden Age gave the world algebra, algorithms, and the medical textbooks that Europe used for 600 years. The thread never broke. It just changed form. Every empire that followed, Roman, Arab, Mongol, Ottoman, British, either copied Persian administrative methods, employed Persian scholars, or built on Persian infrastructure. The Persians didn't just build an empire. They built the operating system that every subsequent civilization ran on. You now know what most people who've studied history for years still haven't put together. Persia wasn't a chapter in ancient history. It was the foundation layer. Rome read from its playbook. The Islamic world built on its science. The modern state system borrowed its administrative logic. And we barely teach it. The story doesn't end here, it evolves. In episode 2, we go deeper. The Sasanian Empire at its peak rivaling Rome. The Islamic conquest that should have erased Persian culture, but instead was transformed by it. The poets, scientists, and architects who kept the flame burning across 1,000 years of invasion and change. If this episode shifted something in how you see the ancient world, that is exactly what this channel is built for. Not to repeat what textbooks say, but to show you what they leave out, who they leave out, and why that matters right now. In 2026, when the heirs of this civilization are still shaping geopolitics, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because every week we go where mainstream history doesn't. The next episode drops soon. And trust me, the Sasanian story makes this one look like the warm-up.